Okay, I wanted to talk about the need to regulate taxi availability and also how it will impact on the COEs going forward. Earlier this year, I spoke about the need to utilize our taxi fleet better and make taxis more readily available to commuters. Before I talk about the measures that we'll be taking, I thought it's good to give some background information, what's the landscape like at this point in time. If you compare the number of taxis in Singapore today, we have about 5 taxis per 1,000 people. That's about double the ratio for Hong Kong. Hong Kong has about 2.6 taxis per 1,000 people. We are about 50% more than London, which has about 3.3 taxis per 1,000, and we are about 3 times that of New York. All right. If we look at what has happened since we deregulated the taxi industry since 2003, we've seen that taxis have grown at a compounded annual growth rate of about 4.3%, while ridership growth had gone at about 1.9%. So intuitively speaking, we ought to see that taxis are more readily available, although I think the evidence doesn't seem to support this. I think part of the reason is that over the years, certainly when we looked at the data for the last 5 years, we have seen that there's been a shift towards drivers operating on a single shift, right? I think about 5 years ago, the ratio of 2-shift to single-shift drivers was about 60-40. Now it's about 50-50. And I think we'll understand that with a single driver, obviously the taxis operate for a shorter period of the day. I think if we look at taxis, we understand that it is part of the public transport spectrum, although it does provide a point-to-point service, but it complements the buses and the trains, and hence as a result, we also offer certain concessions for the taxis, lower road tax, they bid under Cat A, COE, and so on. And what we have also seen, if I may add here, is that we have seen a larger proportion of the Cat A COEs being taken up by the taxi operators in recent years. Because of the concessions given, because of the public transport rule, we need to make sure that we use the taxis more appropriately, make it more readily available to people. And hence, that's the intention behind why we are introducing regulation of taxi availability standards. Okay. We are going to regulate taxi availability starting from January 2013. Okay. We will give a year for transition because this is quite a big change for the operators. And from January 2014 onwards, the growth of the taxi fleet will be contingent on the operators meeting the taxi availability standards. In the interim, from August of this year until the end of 2013, what will happen is that LTA will allow the operators to grow, but at a rate that is closer to the historical growth rate in ridership. Okay, so until the end of 2013, the operators can grow because it is a transition period, but the growth rate will be closer to the historical growth of passengers. And from 2014 onwards, the taxi availability standards will need to be met before the operators can grow their fleet. There are 2 other things that we are going to do with regard to COEs. The first is that arising from feedback from the public, from the motor industry, and from our own assessment, we are going to take the taxis out from bidding for COEs. They will now pay the PQP, both for replacement as well as for new taxis that come into the fleet. I think the PQP works as a result of the average of the last 3 months of COE prices. And today already the ability or the option to pay PQP is available to the taxi operators for the replacement of their fleet. Henceforth, we will make it a requirement that they pay PQP for both the replacement as well as for the growth in the fleet. And so from now on, the taxi operators will be price stickers. The second change that will accompany this is that the taxi COEs will now come from Cat E rather than from Cat A. And Cat E, because all the categories contribute to the numbers in Cat E, so that's one. And second thing is that the variety of taxis that we see come to some extent from Cat A type vehicles, certainly Cat B type vehicles, and some of them are even minibuses. And hence we think that it is more appropriate for the taxi COEs to be taken from the Cat E instead of from Cat A. So if I may summarize what I've just said, one, we are going to regulate taxi availability. The standards will be announced in the fourth quarter of the year. We will give a transition period until the end of 2013. After December 2013 into 2014, the operators will need to meet taxi availability standards before they can grow their fleet. In the transition period, LTA will cap the growth at a rate that is nearer to the historical growth rate in passengers. We will also take the taxis out of the bidding for COEs. They will be price stickers henceforth, and they will pay PQP using the Cat A prices. And the COEs will henceforth, from August, come from the Cat E category, which is contributed by all vehicles.